I am Cameron Brooks, and today is the day I realized that everything I ever believed about love and loyalty was a lie. The call came late in the afternoon, just as I was wrapping up a long day at the garage. The voice on the other end of the line, belonging to a police officer, carried a hint of tension, but it wasn't overly urgent. "Hello, I'm Michael Hayes, the sheriff. I have some important news about your wife, Sarah. She's been in an accident and is currently in the hospital. We need you to come in to complete some procedures." "An accident?" I repeated, unable to believe what I was hearing. Sarah wasn't the type of person who'd easily get into an accident. She was a successful attorney, meticulous in everything she did. "How is she?" I asked, my voice starting to waver slightly. "We can't share too many details right now, but she's in surgery and is expected to pull through. However, we need to ask you a few questions," the officer said, requesting that I come to the hospital as soon as possible. What I felt at that moment wasn't worry, it was a growing unease. Whether it was an accident or not, something didn't feel right. I left the garage in a rush, even though I couldn't fully understand why they needed to ask me questions in the first place. When I arrived at the hospital, 2 police officers were waiting outside the emergency room. "You're Cameron, right?" one of them asked as I approached. "Yes, I'm Cameron," I replied, gripping my sleeve tightly as though trying to keep myself from collapsing. "We need you to answer a few questions. Can you tell us where you've been in the last 3 hours?" I stared at them in confusion. "I've been at the garage all day. I only stepped out briefly to get coffee around 11 a.m. The officers exchanged glances, and one of them walked off toward his colleagues, who were talking with hospital staff. "Can you show us your car?" "Sure, it's outside." "I'll take you to it," I said, feeling the tension building in my chest. I led them to my car, trying to remain calm as they inspected it and took notes. Everything was starting to feel more surreal by the second. Back in the hospital waiting room, I couldn't stop replaying everything that had happened. After the doctor informed me that Sarah was stable but would be asleep until morning, I left the emergency room. Not because I was worried, but because an odd feeling of dread had begun to take hold of me. Something was being hidden from me, I was sure of it. As I stepped out of the hospital, I ran into the 2 officers again. This time, they invited me to the hospital cafeteria for more questions. "We'd like to know more about your relationship with Sarah. She's worked very hard throughout her career, but recently, she decided to step away to prepare for having a child," Sheriff Michael said, his tone probing. "We've been married for 8 years. Sarah loves her work, but she decided to take some time off to enjoy life before starting a family," I replied, trying to keep my composure, though the anxiety within me was growing stronger. They then asked me about a man named Brad Turner. I didn't recognize the name, and when I asked about him, they fell silent. Their line of questioning made me feel as though I was being accused of something I didn't understand. When I pulled into my driveway later that night, I noticed an unfamiliar car parked in front of my house. The unease that had been lingering all day intensified. No one should have been home except Sarah, and I was certain she hadn't invited anyone over in her current condition. I entered the house, my anxiety now impossible to ignore. As I opened the bedroom door, the sound of voices and intimate noises spilled out. The sight before me shattered everything. Sarah, my wife, was in bed with a man I had never seen before. In that moment, time seemed to freeze. I stood motionless in the doorway, my hands trembling as I fought to regain my composure. Anger and betrayal surged through me, but I didn't confront them right away. Part of me wanted to barge in, but I knew I needed to stay calm, no matter how hard it was. I took out my phone and discreetly recorded the scene. These images would serve as proof of everything that had happened. I couldn't believe my eyes. The man, someone I had never even heard of, was comfortable in the home I thought was a sanctuary for Sarah and me. With everything collapsing around me, I turned and quietly left the room, descending the stairs with a mix of disbelief and fury. A part of me wanted to confront him immediately, but I knew I couldn't act impulsively. I needed time to think, to plan. And I needed to protect my own life, no matter how shattered I felt. Everything seemed impossible to accept. I had devoted my life to Sarah, always loving and trusting her. And now, it was all gone, destroyed in a single moment. She had betrayed me. But I couldn't react then and there. I had to stay calm and figure out my next steps. I looked around the house, the place I thought was my safe haven, now filled with lies and pain. I knew what I had to do next. I could never forget those sounds, the way my wife, Sarah, found happiness in the arms of another man, right in the home I had built over the years. I sat there, head in my hands, overwhelmed by a storm of emotions. Anger, hurt, and shame surged through me like a relentless tide, clouding my ability to think clearly. But I knew I couldn't let the pain consume me. No matter what, I was still a strong man. I had to control my emotions, stay steadfast, because there were things to be done, and I couldn't let everything spiral into chaos. I stood up and walked out of the living room, trying to steady my trembling hands. The scenes from earlier replayed in my mind like a slow-motion film. I couldn't keep drowning in them. I needed to react. I needed a plan. As I stepped outside and glanced at the unfamiliar car parked in front of my house, one thing became crystal clear. My life would never be the same again. My wife had betrayed me, and what I saw was the clearest signal of a change I couldn't ignore. The police questions from earlier at the hospital still lingered in my mind. I could sense their suspicion, and I understood why. A strange accident combined with Sarah's inexplicable absence throughout the day were things they couldn't easily explain. They needed answers, and so did I. But I couldn't offer any explanation for what I had witnessed in the bedroom. At that moment, I couldn't help but ask myself, was what I saw just a fleeting moment, or had Sarah truly been betraying me? The thought gnawed at me like a thorn in my heart, preventing me from resting or sleeping. The name Brad Turner echoed in my mind. I didn't know who he was or why the police were interested in him. But I felt that the story between Sarah and him might not be as simple as a single accident or a moment of weakness. Perhaps they'd had a long-standing relationship I had been blind to. I resolved to find out more about Brad. I started searching online and reaching out to a few old friends. My initial efforts yielded no results. But when I asked about him at a bar, a stranger gave me an answer I never wanted to hear. Brad Turner? He's a homewrecker, the man said, looking at me with pity. He doesn't have any morals. Your wife isn't the first woman he's been with. Those words hit me like a slap in the face. I didn't know what to do with that information. With each passing minute, the truth became clearer. Sarah hadn't just deceived me once, she might have been doing so for a long time. And I, like a fool, had failed to see it. Late into the night, as the house grew silent, I still couldn't sleep. The feelings of frustration and despair weighed heavily on me. The images from the bedroom haunted me, along with the memory of my retreat from that room, unable to confront them. The pain attacked me relentlessly, and I realized I couldn't let this go without a response. I began to make plans, not because I wanted revenge, but because I felt I had no other choice. If I did nothing, I'd remain trapped in this anguish. But how could I retaliate intelligently and without leaving a trace? The hatred I felt clouded my judgment, but I needed a clear plan. With everything I now knew about Sarah and Brad, I realized I couldn't let them continue enjoying the comfort I had created for them. I had to make them understand that what they'd done was unforgivable, that I wouldn't let them disrespect me again. The next day, I decided to return to the hospital to visit Sarah. But this time, I wasn't there to play the caring husband. I was there to uncover the truth and bring an end to this pain. I needed to confront her, look her in the eyes, and demand answers. When I entered her hospital room, Sarah was lying in bed, her eyes closed. The wounds on her face made her look like a stranger, not the woman I had once loved. I stood there in silence for a moment, unsure of what to say. The anger and hurt tightened around my heart like a coiled wire. "Sarah," I began, my voice hoarse from the fury building inside me, "why?" I didn't know what kind of answer I expected, but I needed to hear her explanation. She opened her eyes and looked at me. "Cameron." She stopped, her face filled with shame. But then, the words she finally spoke only deepened my anger. "I can't keep living in your shadow, Cameron. I wanted freedom. And Brad, he makes me feel alive again." Her words were like a slap in the face, tearing at my heart piece by piece. Everything I had ever believed in now felt like a cruel joke. I couldn't take it anymore. This feeling, the betrayal, was unbearable. I couldn't just stand there and let her, or him, destroy everything I'd built. It was time to act. Sarah's words were a final blow. She didn't regret what she'd done. She didn't feel any guilt. The pain and anger inside me surged to a level I could no longer contain. I stood there in the stillness of the hospital room, no longer the loving husband, no longer the Cameron she once claimed to love. "So, you've chosen him, then? Brad? You don't need me anymore, is that it?" I tried to keep calm, but my voice cracked and fractured like the remnants of my trust. Sarah looked at me wearily, as if she had been waiting for this moment for a long time. "Cameron, I can't keep living a life where I'm not happy. I don't love you anymore. I love freedom. I love the things you can't give me." Her words cut through me like a knife. I couldn't believe that my wife, the woman I had sacrificed for and trusted all these years, could say such things so casually, as though they were simple truths. She had betrayed me not only through her actions, but in her heart as well. She had completely changed, and I was the last to know. The world spun around me as memories of our time together, the happy days, the beautiful moments, shattered like pieces of a picture that could never be put back together. Everything had changed, and I didn't know if there was any way to salvage what had been lost. When I got home, I saw Sarah's car parked out front. The feeling of betrayal still pierced through my heart, but now it wasn't just pain I felt, it was anger. A rage I couldn't contain. I had to do something. As I stepped into the house, I wondered if I could withstand the weight of this betrayal. Standing at the bedroom door, a place I once thought of as our sanctuary, I was reminded of the undeniable proof of her infidelity. The sounds, the sights, they were still so vivid, like a wound that wouldn't heal. The memories of Sarah, the things she had said, and all the times I had ignored the signs to trust in her love now resurfaced as bitter irony. How could I have been so blind? How could I not have seen that she had changed long ago? Not just today. Not just last week. Sarah had stopped being the woman I loved a long time ago. I began searching for information about Brad. His name was now a glaring question mark in my life. I couldn't just sit there and do nothing while my wife carried on with him. I needed to know everything, his past, his work, anything that could shed light on his connection to Sarah. I decided to reach out to old friends, people who might know something about Brad. One of them, Michael, a car racer with a broad network in the business world, seemed like a good lead. I called him. "Michael, I need to know about someone named Brad Turner." "Do you know who he is?" "Brad Turner? Damn it, you're caught up in this mess?" Michael asked, his voice filled with surprise. "He's bad news. Your wife isn't the first woman he's wrecked. Michael's words sent chills down my spine. All this time, I thought I knew my wife, but it turned out I didn't know her at all. Brad wasn't just the man Sarah had an affair with. He had been involved with other women, all of whom ended up leaving broken and used. A pang of guilt rose in me. I had let Sarah fall into the hands of someone like him, and now it had spiraled out of control. But I wasn't looking for apologies or reasons. I didn't need to know why he did what he did. I only wanted to put an end to it. To show him I wasn't someone to trifle with. Yet when I found his address, I realized not everything could be solved through violence. The anger inside me grew stronger, but I knew I didn't want to become like him. Back at home, I couldn't stop thinking about what I had done and what I was about to do. I had come dangerously close to losing control. Every emotion, every ounce of rage, was waiting to explode. But I knew what had to be done. It wasn't about confronting Brad with force, but about confronting my own emotions. I decided to take a different approach, something that would change everything. I wouldn't let my anger dictate my actions. Instead, I would face this betrayal intelligently, in a way that would force both Sarah and Brad to realize that things couldn't go on like this. Now, it wasn't just the pain and betrayal I had to deal with. I had to decide how to move forward, and that choice would define the rest of my life. Things were becoming clearer. As the daylight faded and darkness enveloped the house, I sat in my office, staring at the blank whiteboard in front of me. Plans began to form in my mind, but the question lingered: how could I execute them without leaving a trace? How could I exact my revenge without paying too high a price? These questions swirled in my head, and I knew I needed a plan that would make Sarah and Brad face the consequences of their actions. The first step was to remove emotion from the equation. I couldn't let anger take over. If I did, everything would devolve into chaotic revenge, like what I had almost done when I found them in the bedroom. I couldn't let things get worse. But I also couldn't let them walk away unscathed. So, I needed to deliver a shock, a blow they wouldn't forget. Part of me wanted to confront Brad immediately, to attack him and settle everything with brute force. But I knew there was another way. If I truly wanted him to pay, I had to be smarter. I couldn't let myself be consumed by uncontrolled fury. Then, I remembered something I had learned in the military: shock and awe, a tactic I would apply to this situation. I couldn't act right away, knowing that impulsiveness would only make things worse. But I also couldn't stop thinking about what I would do. Let them feel fear. Let them understand that I'm not someone they can trample on. With a new plan in mind, I found inspiration in something tucked away in my workspace. In the garage, where I often worked on cars, there was an old tool cabinet, filled with items I rarely used. Among them was a device I never thought I'd need: a stun grenade, a non-lethal weapon capable of disorienting anyone within its range for several seconds. I had learned how to use one during a military training course years ago. A device designed to create a powerful shockwave, incapacitating people just long enough to act decisively. It was exactly what I needed: a sudden, unavoidable strike. First, I carefully prepared the stun grenade. I knew I couldn't use it recklessly. Any loud sound or sudden movement might alert them that something was wrong. But I could make my arrival a shock, throwing them into chaos before they could react. The plan was straightforward: wait for the moment when Sarah and Brad least expected me. The element of surprise would throw them off balance, and from there, I'd deliver the real shock. Once Brad was incapacitated, I'd throw him out through the back door, leaving Sarah to face the consequences of her actions alone. The thought of this filled me with a strange sense of purpose, igniting a fire I hadn't felt in days. The pain, the loss, all of it was transforming into determination. This time, I wasn't afraid or hesitant. I was prepared. With the stun grenade in hand, I began climbing the stairs, moving carefully to avoid making a sound. From a distance, I could hear their laughter and Sarah's voice. They were in the bedroom, and this time, I was determined not to let anything stop me. I didn't linger outside the door, uncertain like I had the first time. I walked purposefully toward the room, my steps measured but deliberate. I knew I had to get everything just right. Standing just outside the bedroom door, I took a deep breath. My heart pounded, but my mind was resolute. They no longer had power over me. I retrieved the stun grenade, calmly attaching the pin. One press, and everything would change. When I entered the room, Brad was standing at the foot of the bed, breathless and clearly ready for their next round of fun. Seeing that scene, it's impossible to describe the emotions I felt. But this wasn't the moment for feelings. I took another deep breath, rushed forward, and triggered the stun grenade. A blinding flash and deafening bang filled the room, leaving everything in disarray. My own vision blurred from the light, but I knew the plan was unfolding as intended. They couldn't do anything now. All they could do was reel in shock, unable to react. Brad lay sprawled on the floor, clutching his midsection, unable to stand. Sarah had collapsed face down on the carpet, mumbling incoherently, her eyes dazed and unfocused. This wasn't the ending I wanted. But it was a moment that made a statement, a reminder that betrayal would not be without consequence. They were helpless, unable to move, call for help, or even comprehend what had just happened. I didn't feel satisfied, but I also didn't feel regret. What I had done wasn't about vengeance, but about sending a clear message. Sarah and Brad would never forget this day. And I would never forget that I had overcome my anger to take control of the situation. The room fell silent, save for the sound of Sarah and Brad's labored breathing. This wasn't an act of retribution, but a shock, a warning. I stood at the doorway, watching them sprawled on the floor, powerless and stunned. Sarah's face was pale, and Brad clutched himself in pain, likely knowing that his future escapades would be permanently affected. I didn't feel triumph. There was no satisfaction in what I'd done. All I felt was emptiness. What I'd done couldn't undo the past or restore the love that was lost. But I knew this was the end. My relationship with Sarah, it would never be the same. There was no going back. I turned my back, stepped out of the room, and gently closed the door behind me. A profound stillness settled over the house, not just in the air, but within me. A quiet sense of release, like I had finally let go. I no longer needed Sarah's explanations or apologies. Although I had done what I thought was right, it still felt like I was living in shadows. Reporters began invading my life, digging into every corner, pestering my friends and family for details. The invasion only added to my discomfort. But I stayed silent, confiding only in those I trusted most. A week later, I received a letter. From Sarah. "Cameron," she wrote, her tone filled with regret and anguish. "I don't know how to put into words how sorry I am. Every day, I feel nothing but guilt for the pain I've caused you. I never imagined things would go this far. I betrayed you, and I know I've lost everything, your love, your trust, and your respect. You can hate me, but I will always love you. I only hope you can forgive me, even though I know it's far too late." Her words weren't an excuse, but an acknowledgement, a full admission of her guilt. I didn't feel satisfaction as I read them. There was no joy in her apology. Only an emptiness, because I had long since realized that the love we once shared had died the moment she chose Brad. Her apology couldn't change the truth. Everything felt so overwhelming. I didn't know what I would do next. Could I give Sarah another chance? Could I forgive her after everything that had happened? The answer wasn't simple, and I couldn't make a decision right away. One day, While I was sitting in my office, I got a call from Sarah's father. He was a strong man who had always stood by his family. "Cameron," his voice came through the line, steady but somber, "I know we can't change the past, but I want to ask you for a favor. Sarah's going through a really tough time. She needs your support. Can you keep her on your health insurance for a little while longer?" His words didn't make me feel guilty, but there was a certain relief in them. I realized that, no matter what had happened, I couldn't completely abandon Sarah. She was still a part of my life. No matter how much she had hurt me, a part of me still wanted to help. I drove to the hospital where Sarah was being treated. She didn't know I was coming, but I felt I needed to do this. When I walked into her room, her eyes searched for mine with a mix of worry and hope. The wounds on her face hadn't healed, and the silence between us made the atmosphere even heavier. "Cameron, I'm truly sorry," Sarah said, her voice weak, as if she lacked the strength to say more. "I know I hurt you deeply, but I can't live without acknowledging what I've done. You're the best man I've ever had in my life." I looked into her eyes, and for the first time, I felt no anger. Instead, there was emptiness. I knew I wouldn't go back to her. But I also knew I couldn't hold on to resentment forever. "Sarah," I began, my voice calm, "I can't go back to you. What we had is gone. But I'll help you as long as you need it." Those words felt like a release, not just for Sarah, but for me as well. I had chosen not to let anger control me. And that was the greatest lesson I had learned in all of this. Vengeance isn't always the answer. Sometimes, forgiveness is the only way to free yourself from the past. I didn't get back together with Sarah, and I no longer carried hatred in my heart. Things had changed, and I understood that no matter what had happened, I had to move forward. The pain couldn't last forever. The relationship was over, and I had learned how to stop letting the past dictate my future. Whatever Sarah and Brad had done, I knew I had to continue living my life. And in some way, I found a sense of peace within myself.